This Week in Startups is brought to you by Braintree. Looking to set up payments for your business? Braintree gives your app or website a payment solution that accepts just about every payment method with one simple integration. Plus, we'll give you your first $50,000 in transactions fee-free. To learn more, visit braintreepayments.com/twist. And Squarespace. Start building your website today at squarespace.com. Enter offer code TWIST at checkout to get 10% off. Squarespace. Build it beautiful.
Hey everybody, data is eating the world. You all know that. And data science, data scientists, and just trying to understand what's going on in the world is one of the huge opportunities of our lifetime and future lifetimes here on the planet, because let's face it, we've figured out a lot of what happens in the mechanical world, the industrial age, and even in semiconductors and figuring out hardware. A lot of these problems have been solved, and we're on a pretty predictable trajectory. Where we're not on a predictable route is data. Reams and reams of data are being collected all over the world. Things like our location, things like our DNA, and we don't know how to make sense of it. Well, we're going to need tools, and we're going to need people to think about data. And this is where, of course, data science comes in and data scientists. And today on the program, Hadley Wickham is with us. And he is, I guess people have told me you're the preeminent data science person in the world. I don't know if that is, you're laughing, but I think it's kind of true because you wrote RStudio, which is the open source software that everybody uses to do big data statistics. Is that fair?
Yeah, I didn't write RStudio itself, but I've written a lot of R packages that help people do data science.
So when you define data science, I give my little preamble of why I think it's important. I saw you nodding in my peripheral vision. Data science has become super important in the last 10 or 20 years in a way that it wasn't as big of a focus before that. Is that because we're just storing more data?
I think it's I think it's part of that. I think it's also because of our ability to compute on that data and do stuff with that data has grown substantially. And also I think this sort of slow process of people understanding that data is actually really valuable. There's, I think, a very natural human ability to tell stories about things, to base decisions on anecdotes. And it takes quite a while before people kind of learn that, hey, data is a really great way of, even better than anecdotes, of making decisions.
Yeah, we have a lot of anecdotal data in things like presidential races, or when people, are debating social policy. Just looking at the legalization of marijuana. It's been decades and decades of people saying, hey, this thing is incredibly dangerous, and then all of a sudden it flips, and it's like, well, actually, it turns out it's not that dangerous, and then maybe alcohol is the biggest, most dangerous drug of them all. What do you think we've learned in society in the last 10 or 20 years to you that has been profound, that data science has really shed a light on? When you're looking at different discoveries and different ways of looking at the world, are there things that you think in 10 years even or 20 years people will look back and say, my God, didn't these people look at the data and that the data just made it super clear that this was a better option?
So to me, it's not really necessarily about the kind of the big things, but lots and lots of the little things.
Explain.
So one thing to me, how do you pick who should you recruit for your sports team?
Yes.
I think that's a great example because there's been this huge transition from going based on how do they look, what's your gut instinct, to actually looking at the data and kind of consciously and rationally making decisions based on data rather than the stories you tell yourself or anecdotes.
Right. So the Moneyball movie was based largely on looking at statistical anomalies, people who just were great all-around players, but maybe they didn't have the big names or they didn't swing for the fences, as it were, but they were just really good utility players, I guess. They got the job done.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's sort of interesting, and I'm no expert in sports, but in basketball, baseball, it's very easy to tell who's contributing the runs.
Right.
Basketball, it's much, much harder, and now I think what's interesting is people are coming up with methods to say how can we measure, this guy doesn't make a lot of shots, but when he's on the field, everyone else does better.
Yeah, what do they call that? Your plus minus?
Yeah.
So when you're on the court, the team is up this many points versus when you're not on the court, they go down this many points because some people are doing tip-ins or they're setting great screens, things that don't come up in the typical shooting percentage or rebounds. Very minor statistics.
Yeah, so sports is like one thing like that. Another thing that I think sort of interesting that I know about because of my dad is like there's a similar problem with cows.
With cows?
With cows. So traditionally, like,
Your dad fancies cows? He's a cow herder in New Zealand?
He's a cow geneticist.
Cow geneticist
yes.
in New Zealand?
And in Ireland.
In Ireland. Okay.
Yes.
Wait, you're from New Zealand?
I'm from New Zealand. My parents moved to Ireland about 15 years ago.
Wow,
so
how international.
For this
okay,
job,
so he is a cow geneticist.
Yes, and there's sort of there's the same thing there. Like, you're a farmer, you want to pick cows that are going to like you want cows that optimally turn grass into milk and meat.
Correct.
And traditionally, the way that people picked those cows is they basically like looked at the cows and said, well, this cow looks pretty.
Pretty big, good looking, feels right.
Yep, so let's make more cows like this one.
They didn't actually look at the milk output or the amount of flesh coming off of the animal.
And even if they did look
morbid.
at, I think one thing that's interesting, even if they did look at the amount of milk they produced, they didn't also measure how much grass it was eating. So for a long time, you made these cows that produced a huge amount of milk, but weren't actually that efficient in converting grass into milk.
Wow, that is mind-blowing. And
Yeah.
so is the thing that we're getting super good at the collection of data? Because it seems to me a lot of the sensor data in the world is having a profound impact. There are many startups now that are looking at soil and moisture in soil and nitrogen in soil to understand, how to fertilize an acre more efficiently, et cetera. But we just have so much more data on traffic patterns, on the temperature, just all these sensors out there, and it really starts with the smartphone. Are those contributing to this big data revolution?
I mean, they're definitely contributing to the big data revolution. I'm always a little skeptical because it's not about getting more data necessarily, it's about getting the right data. And often, like, you sort of got two options. You can try and go out there and collect absolutely everything, which if it's easy to do, sure, you might as well go and do that. Or you can be a little bit more thoughtful and kind of think about, like, what's the smallest amount of work I can do in order to collect the data that's going to be useful. And I think a little bit of that has been sort of lost recently, that people are so excited, like, we can collect absolutely everything. But then you're sort of overwhelmed. You can't see the forest for the trees. Like, there's just so much data. And to get down to what you actually need to answer the question you're interested in, that's quite a big challenge.
Because the amount of time it takes to process the data, to store the data becomes ridiculous?
And then just so much of it's irrelevant. And because it hasn't, ideally you want data that has been collected at random. So that there's kind of no external process that's influencing like which data points are getting selected. So if you end up kind of taking all of the data, and this is sort of what statisticians will call a convenience sample, you collect everything that's easy to collect.
A convenience sample.
A convenience sample.
Hopefully representative, but...
Hopefully, but the identifying characteristic is what is convenient to capture it, not that it was doing a really good job of representing everything. So I'm always a little bit cautious about just collecting more data. That's great, but you do need to make sure you're collecting the right data.
How much of an impact has Nate Silver had? I guess in the last presidential election, he kind of nailed it using statistics. At least that's the story that, as I know it. And now they've built this 538 and ESPN property based just on data.
Yeah.
And the New York Times was kind of revolutionized by just this data approach. One person or him and a couple of people just doing data science were able to make more compelling original content than the other journalists telling anecdotal stories. So this has had a huge impact on journalism, hasn't it?
I kind of think of this as like, this is the moneyballing of a discipline. Like, it only takes a few people using data who are doing a much more successful than people not using data, and everyone realizes, hey, we should be thinking about how to use data and how to use it more effectively. So I think that's happened in journalism. It happened in cattle breeding, in the 80s. It's happening with sports.
How did it happen in cattle breeding, by the way? What was it that they did on a Moneyball basis, on a statistics basis? What were the big data things they were trying to figure out?
I don't really know that much about the history. I mean, I think it was because it was much more sort of. I think it's an interesting combination because there's a lot of academics who are interested in the genetic side of things, and you've got this strong kind of commercial. You've got farmers who want to make money, and it's that combination of like really wanting to understand something well that the academics bring, and they're like, what can we do today that's practical and useful that actual farmers.
When we get back from the commercial break, I want to talk about the tool R. Mm-hmm. It's just people refer to it as R. Mm-hmm. When did this tool come out, and what kind of impact has it had on the space when we get back on This Week in Startups? Hey, everybody, let me tell you a little bit about Braintree. It's a full-stack payment solution for all your payment types for your customers. Yes, you can do mobile payments fast, easy, seamless, and secure. And you can add it to your apps with just a few lines of code, and then you'll be able to accept Apple Pay, Android Pay, PayPal, Venmo, credit cards, and of course, Bitcoin, everything. And if some other new way to pay people comes along, you know the Braintree team will support that too. Developers love it, founders love it, because it's got superior fraud protection, fast payouts, and continuous world-class support. You'll have fewer abandoned carts, more sales with Braintree's best-in-class mobile checkout. And their customers include, are you ready for this? Uber, Thumbtack, Hotel Tonight, Airbnb, GitHub, and StubHub. And I'm an investor in 2 of those 6 companies. And you'd be in good company to be in that class of companies. Well, here's a call to action, everybody. They're going to give you $50,000 in transactions fee-free. Yes, that's for the people who are on the This Week in Startups audience. If they go to braintreepayments.com/twist, braintreepayments.com/twist, and you'll get $50,000 fee-free. You can't go wrong with that. Developers love it. It's easy to use. What more do you need to know? Thank you to my friends at Braintree for sponsoring independent media like This Week in Startups. Okay, let's get back to the program. Hey everybody, welcome back to This Week in Startups. I'm your host, Jason Calacanis. You can follow me on Twitter, Jason, and the show at TWI Startups. Hadley Wickham is our guest today. He's Hadley Wickham, Wickham, and he is a professor of statistics at Rice University, chief scientist at RStudio, which is an open source software platform. And you become a bit of a rock star in this area of big data and statistics. What were the packages that you added to RStudio or R that made you so famous or infamous in this sort of space?
In the nerd space.
In the nerd space.
I mean, the package I'm most well known for is ggplot2, which is a package for turning data into visualizations.
Got it. And you have some visualizations right here.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's take a look at some of these visualizations. And RStudio is an open source project, but you also have a for-profit company.
Yes, that's correct.
That's called RStudio as well.
Yes.
So like WordPress has WordPress.com and WordPress.org, there's a group of developers who are contributing to an open source project, and you have the hosted version of it. Would that be correct? Or,
so we basically we have open source and commercial versions of all of our products, and the commercial versions basically provide things that big companies care about, like vendor authentication and logging and monitoring and all that kind of stuff.
Important stuff.
Yeah, we also provide tools that help teams of our programmers work together. So one thing I think that's really interesting that's starting to happen is now, in a company you might have 10 or 15 people who all understand R or working on it. They need tools to collaborate.
Right.
And then they also need tools to share their results with the people in their company who are not so familiar with R. So we also have a product around that.
What type of companies work with your company?
It is
3-letter acronyms from the government?
I don't think we have. Well, so interestingly, there's at least 2 New Zealand government agencies who work with us. I'm not.
And they got Kim.com. They busted it. So mission accomplished. You got the biggest terrorist in New Zealand. I kid, Kim. I'm kidding.
So in the US, I think we've talked like the Census Bureau and Bureau of Labor Statistics, lots of like all of the big internet companies, Google and Facebook, and like everyone is using R these days. R is really big in pharma as well, so Novartis and Pfizer and all the big pharmaceutical companies are using R. It's really the thing that really amazes me is just the diversity and the diversity of people I talk to, not just customers, but people using the open source products.
When did the open source project start? When did it release its first version?
So I think that was around. I'm just going to cheat here and I'm going to look it up on Wikipedia because
I've heard about it for a little while.
It's been around longer than you. It's been around, so since 1993, so 23 years ago.
Wow.
So
As an open source project?
As an open source project.
Wow. So it was around pre-web.
Yeah,
That's mind-blowing.
It's incredible. But it's only really in the last few years that it's just been skyrocketing in popularity. For a long time it was very popular with statisticians, and it's sort of really only recently, and it's sort of amazing to me that that I now can have this like kind of rock star status, that there are enough people who care about this very, very legitimately very, very nerdy stuff.
There was dozens of people probably using this, or low hundreds of people. How many people are using R now? Thousands, tens of thousands?
Millions, we think.
Millions.
It's hard to know exactly how many people are using it, but it's definitely in the millions.
Hey, show me some of these visualizations that you have here. And why is visualization important? I mean, when you think about statistics, shouldn't it just tell you the number, and is that enough? Why are these visualizations so important?
I think visualizations are important because data science is a fundamentally human activity. Because you can't, I think that there are two reasons you can't just rely on numbers. First of all, to get the right number, you have to be able to ask the right question. And often you have this sort of vague, ill-formed question in your head, and you need to make it precise enough that you can answer it with a number. And so visualizations are really helpful at kind of raising hypotheses and thinking, maybe I could summarize it this way, or maybe I could summarize it that way. The other really great thing about visualizations is that they can surprise you. So you can see something that you did not expect. And that is really, really difficult to program code to do that, because how do you tell a computer what's normal, what it should expect?
Yeah, so what looks different, what looks unique is something that is a uniquely human process. I mean, with artificial intelligence, I guess we will start to understand what is unique to us. But let's take a look at what's the first visualization we're taking a look at here. It looks like I'm looking at the cosmos.
Yeah, so this is, so James Cheshire is a geographer in England. So this is a map of England where he's been mapping the ways that people drive, the ways that people travel to work. So he has a really...
Drive to work.
Drive to work, I think. Yeah, so he has a really fascinating book. It's actually like a coffee table book that's just full of graphics about London and about England. And a very, very large number of these have been built using R and other open source tools.
Right, so we see these kind of swirly charts that you're starting to see in a lot of the magazines these days. Those swirly charts, those are made with R.
Some of them are. I mean, there's a lot of...
And then photoshopped after?
Yeah, sometimes, yes. And sometimes people, a lot of magazines, people just kind of draw them in Photoshop or Illustrator directly. Those sort of infographic-y things, like in some sense, what I'm showing you for R graphics is in some sense, to me, completely illegitimate, because the graphics that are really cool is some scientist looking at something, they're studying fly larvae, and they see something really interesting in a graph that to you or me would be completely boring and uninteresting. Those are the graphs that I really get excited about.
Right.
But, they're kind of hard to show to other people. So it's nice to kind of show these things that look really, really impressive. But to me, what's exciting is that the people who are using this to gain understanding in that, the tiny little area of science that they're interested in, or helping understand what's driving things in their company.
Where do you hope the world gets to in terms of how we progress as a society through the use of data? Because let's face it, this is complicated stuff, interpreting data. And we live in a society where we have these great scientists who clearly show us that the planet is heating up. And yet people still look at the data associated with climate change, which is irrefutable, and still make arguments in the face of data, charts, visualizations, whatever it happens to be, and a unanimous vote by scientists that this is happening. And they still try to deny it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's sort of one of the limitations of data, is that, people are not rational. You don't persuade people generally by showing them the data. You persuade them by telling them a story, by by taking the data and turning it into a narrative that they can understand and tie into things that they've experienced in their life. So I think data is fantastic, but it's not the be all and end all. You can't answer every single question with data, and you do need to be able to kind of package it up and provide a narrative that people can understand and is compelling to them.
How are data scientists working with, say, journalists or other storytellers? And because you're sort of saying that you can't have one without the other. You need to have the sort of anecdotal with the data or the storytelling with the data. You have to be able to tell a story through data. Who's doing that really well? Who do you look at and say, my God, this is just such a great alignment of that?
I mean, I think you've mentioned them already, like 538 and the Upshot. I think they're fantastic, and they're now not just journalists, but a lot of journalists are becoming, kind of legitimate data scientists. So they understand how to use the data, they understand how to tell a story. I think that's a really, really compelling combination.
Can you show me some more of these visualizations you have here? So we saw the London people traveling. That sounds pretty interesting.
So this is sort of this is just like a real kind of workman graph. Let me show you the non-animated version. Like, often you want to label stuff in your graph.
Right.
And when you label things, if you just put them where the data is, you get something like this, where you've just got like this massive blob of
everybody's used Excel or some spreadsheet where it just throws, when you put stuff on a chart, just layers it on top of each other. Completely stupid.
So this is a neat package, not written by me, written by someone else in the R community, called GG Repel. And what it does is it actually kind of makes sure the labels repel each other, so you can more easily see what's going on. There's a cute little animation of that in action down here.
Yeah, they're kind of bouncing off of each other, all the labels.
Exactly. And it's just like, sometimes it's little stuff like this that just makes your life as a data scientist so much easier, because you can just say label list and it figures out, the computer figures out for you where to put the labels, rather than you having to painstakingly move them around until you can see everything.
Where should we be focusing our data scientist resources? If you could take 100 data scientists using R and say, hey, get on this project because it's going to have the biggest impact for society in some way, where would you, as the the president of data scientists, where would you tell them, go here first? So is it in the DNA? Is it in our, curing cancer moonshot that President Obama is now doing?
I guess actually my feeling would be to say, like, invest it in education. Like, let's figure out how can we, like, help people get smarter faster? How can we help people to learn better? Because I think that's such, like, it not only pays off, but the payoffs accumulate, and you sort of you get the spiraling,
compounding.
Exactly.
If society got smarter, we'd make smarter kids. We'd be able to learn more. So learning how to learn and. What do you think the basic understanding of statistics is in society today? When you talk to people, it's incredibly low. People don't even know what percentages mean.
Yeah, it's
abysmal.
Though I think it's interesting, though, that I don't know if the amount of knowledge has changed, but the attitude is changing to statistics. I mean, I feel like 5 years ago, like if I was at a party and someone said, "Oh, what do you do?" and I'd say statistics, the sort of two most common responses to that was, "Oh, I took a statistics class in college and I hated it," or they'll just like turn around and walk away.
Right.
But now, like, statistics is cool. Like, people are like interested in big data and data science, and it's such a weird feeling, like going from being a specialist in something that is like the most uncool thing that anyone can do to something that people are now getting really excited about. And
self-driving cars seem to me to be one of the ultimate big data mapping projects. Are people using R for that? And you wouldn't actually know, maybe.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Is that a statistics question? Is it a big data question, like trying to figure out, with all these cars on the road, where they're going, or is it more just a sensors and just don't bump into each other kind of problem?
Sort of, to me, that feels like the sort of classic kind of machine learning problem, where, like, and in some way, like the difference between statistics and machine learning is...
What is it?
I think it's like by and large, and this is kind of a gross generalization, is that machine learners care about making really accurate predictions. Like they want to take all that information coming into the car, the video cameras and the laser distance interferometers, and they want to turn that into prediction. Like what should the car do next in order to be safe?
Right.
And I think statisticians generally, traditionally, have not been driven by that. What they've been driven by is like, how can we understand what is going on at a very low level? Like, how can we do better science? How can we understand how all of these little things fit together? And so that's kind of traditionally mean like statistics, like it's pretty low level, works with smaller data sets. They're trying to answer like, what is the underlying theory here? And machine learners are all about like getting as much data as they possibly can and thinking like, we don't really care what the mechanism is. How can we do a really, really good job of predicting what's going to happen next?
Yeah, answering the question of the moment as opposed to, what's happening at this very moment as opposed to what happened. One is for future looking versus past looking. What is the open writing process? What does that mean?
So recently, the last few books I've written, I have written them completely in the open. So I think it's pretty common now. Well, it's pretty easy now to go to a publisher and say like, I want to license my book with a Creative Commons license. So I want all this work I'm doing not just to be available to people who are going to drop $50 in a book, but also to be available to anyone on the web. So the book
R for data science.
Yeah, so
I have it pulled up here on the screen.
Oh, cool.
And so I see you're doing an O'Reilly book. So you have what animal did they give you?
So that is the Nankeen night heron.
Correct. I was just testing you.
So I asked. So with O'Reilly books, you may or may not know this, but you're not allowed to request a specific animal, but I very politely asked whether it might be possible to have a New Zealand native animal on the the cover, and they accommodated me.
And so if I click on Tidy Data, the book is all here.
Yes, so you got lucky and you picked a chapter that's pretty complete. If you keep browsing around, you'll find there's some chapters that are, if you click on like Discover. And
you have done nothing.
Exactly. You can
so
see
you're
there
behind, your publisher must be thrilled with you.
Gapminder.
So now I can edit this page myself.
Yep.
Sign in with my GitHub.
Yep.
And I can edit the book.
Yes.
So this is actually occurring on GitHub?
Yes.
The GitHub book. I didn't know people were doing that.
Well, I'm doing it at least.
Yeah. Hilarious.
So the cool thing is that when you click on edit this page, it's kind of like a wiki, except it creates a pull request on GitHub, so I can review the changes before accepting it. And so it's. Most people just fix little typos and stuff, which is great because I'm a terrible proofreader and I make typos all over the place. A few people kind of contribute, paragraphs of text, or maybe they come up with a great exercise to be included. But for me, what's really great is just that motivation that someone has not only read it, but they've cared enough about it to make a change. That makes it so much easier to continue that kind of long process of getting all of your thoughts out of your head and into a book. And I could not go back to writing books like in the old process where you just kind of basically lock yourself away for 2 years and then the book comes out and then you get feedback on it, by which point you're like, I wish I'd known that a year ago.
Well, especially for a technical journal, technology moves so fast, it's hard to actually print the pages in time. Although O'Reilly does a really good job, I think, with their ebooks and PDFs. When we get back from commercial break, I want to talk about running an open source project and who is actually contributing to it and how do you manage the debates as to what should be in the code base when we get back on This Week in Startups. Let me take a moment to thank my friends at Squarespace. And the reason I want to thank them is because the Launch Festival website, launchfestival.com and launchhackathon.com are gorgeous. They are perfect. They look like we spent $250,000 on them. And I can tell you, when I priced out getting the launch websites built, people quoted me literally 6 figures to make a beautiful, robust website. You know what? I got Squarespace and I used their templates, and my team, without any technical knowledge, no developers, were able to make the most gorgeous websites that are responsive and look great on mobile or tablet or on the desktop and have videos running in the background, and they integrate with everything we use. And they're so simple to use that I just said to my chief of staff, can you spend an hour teaching everybody how to use Squarespace so anybody can change the website. And he said, I did it in 5 minutes. It's that easy. So easy to use, so beautiful. And you can make a professional looking, well-designed, intuitive, and easy to use site with no code. It's just so easy. It's state-of-the-art technology. It's secure, it's stable, and it's trusted by millions. Some of the most respected brands in the world use it, in fact, and it starts at only $8 a month, which, if my math is correct, is like under $100 a year, which is ridiculous. And you get a free domain, in fact, if you sign up for a year. Start your free trial today. No credit card required. And if you decide to sign up for Squarespace, please use the offer code TWIST and get 10% off, because that makes them feel great about This Week in Startups and their support of it. So go ahead and thank @Squarespace on Twitter if you love the program. Literally, that's one of the best things. I don't ask you guys for much help, but literally telling everybody on your Twitter, I love Squarespace, I use Squarespace, thank you Squarespace for supporting @TWI Startups. Super helpful, because you get the word out about their great product, you get the word out about how great the program is, and it all just works well. And I'll probably retweet you and favorite, so it's a good benefit for you too. Squarespace. Build it beautiful. What a great tagline. Build it beautiful. I love it. I love it. I love it. Simple, easy, beautiful, and affordable. In fact, I think it's too cheap. I would pay $80 a month. I'd pay probably $800 a month for our service. This is good. Literally, it's worth $10,000 a year, and they're charging under $100. I don't get it. I don't know how they make this such a successful business. But I guess the secret is in the fact that millions of people use it. And when millions of people use your product, you know what? It becomes more stable, more reliable, faster, and you add more features because you're making money and you can invest in the platform. And that's one of the beautiful things I've seen. Every single quarter, Squarespace adds new features. Like they have a calendar feature, which we love. All this different support. We say, hey, I wonder if Squarespace can do this. And then we look on their blog, and it's just like this constant cadence of new product coming out of that company. The product cadence at Squarespace is really impressive. All right, anyway, listen, I could talk about Squarespace all day because I love the product. And as you know, the partners on the show, they're all people who we use their products. We call it whitelisted advertising here, whitelisted partnerships. Squarespace, amazing. Build it beautiful. Thank you to my friends at Squarespace. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to This Week in Startups. Hadley Wickham is our guest today, and he is a professor of statistics at Rice University and the chief scientist at RStudio, which is a company that works with the open source R software. How big is the company? Is this a boutique company, or is this a venture-backed operation? What is this? Is this an angel-backed? Maybe I can get in on this.
It's semi-venture-backed. So we
semi-venture with angels or donations?
So we do have venture funding, but the goal of the company is not to kind of go big or go bust. The goal is to create more of a sustainable business. So we're currently, I think, at 25 employees. So we're like we're decent size.
That's a lot of mouths to feed.
Yeah, we've just become profitable. So
congratulations.
Yes.
So people hosting and using the software and the audit trails is enough. People pay hundreds of dollars a month, thousands of dollars a month to do this?
So most of our products are around like $10,000 a year. So.
Okay. So it's not cheap, but it's also so inexpensive compared to rolling your own.
And especially, if you've got like a team of 4 data scientists, a data scientist is going to be setting you back probably at least $150 a year. You only have to save a small amount of their time to recoup $10,000. So
who's the lead investor in this company? Is it some VC?
Yes, and I think...
You forget them? You forget your VC?
I always forget.
Well, you're not the CEO.
I'm not like the money guy. My job,
I'm
like the cost center. I just spend the company's money. I don't make any money for the company.
I'll have producer Jackie tell me who your investors are. I'm just
curious.
Hopefully where's it based? Where's the company based?
Boston.
In Boston? Of all places. Very cool. And where do you get all your data scientists? Who produces the best data scientists? Is that like an MIT thing or a Harvard thing? Or where do all these data scientists come out?
I don't know. I don't think there's currently like a really great kind of academic program that's churning out fantastic data scientists. I think there are a lot of universities that are like trying to ramp up and get masters of data science.
Is that now a actual degree, data science?
Yep.
When did data science become a degree?
Like in the last year or two.
Just in the last year or two.
I mean, yeah, the master's programs at universities are really like that. They are cash cows, and so whenever like a lot of universities like try and get in on these trends as quickly as possible.
Oh, is that right?
Because they'll pay, they cost like 40 or 50K a year often, and because of the weird way that budgets work in universities, often you get like in a typical university department, like 90% of the budget is salaries. And those salaries, those people all have tenure, so there's nothing you can do to change that amount of money. So you've got this small amount of money, and just bringing in a few extra $100,000 a year, that can really like fundamentally change what a department can do.
Very interesting. So when you have that master's program, something new that's desirable, higher ed is really got this incredible cost basis. It's hard to know if it's worth it. Like, are people self-teaching, teaching themselves data science largely? And, like,
so I think people, like, if you like a PhD in statistics is great preparation. People are, computer scientists are upskilling to learn about the statistics. There's some great courses on, Coursera. Like the Johns Hopkins has a really fantastic
on Coursera for free.
And then you can pay for, if you want to become like an accredited.
Pay for paper. As we say in the biz. Pay for paper. You pay to get your degree. If not, you get like a pat on the back.
Exactly, and you get the knowledge.
So RStudio as the open source project, there's hundreds and hundreds of people contributing to this. How do you build a business on an open source project that has all these people who are not aligned necessarily with your business, but are contributing? And who are the main contributors to R these days?
So I think part of the making a business on open source is finding the things that, like, there's a lot of infrastructure stuff that's really pretty boring to work on. And if you're doing an open source side project, you want to work on something fun. You don't want to work on like this low level plumbing stuff that, sure, it makes everyone's lives much better, but it's, right down in the foundations and no one ever looks at it.
Login, hosting, all this nonsense.
So I think, and even in like installers is another thing. Like writing installers that work on everyone's computer, that's like a nightmarish hellhole. I think one of the things that I like about our company is that, like, we invest in that infrastructure because we want the R community to succeed, and we can sort of see these areas where individual R developers who are often, interested in the data primarily, not the programming, that they're not interested in working on these sort of infrastructure tools. We can come in and work on that and make everyone's lives better.
And the people who are the main contributors to the R core code base, these are who?
They're academics primarily. So I think one thing that's really interesting about R as an open source community is the average age is like the average age of R core, who are the people who modify R, the language itself. I think the average age must be like in the mid-50s or
really?
older. Yeah.
Wow.
So these are people who are passionate about open source.
You've got a lot of Gandalfs in there, I
guess.
A lot of white beards in there.
Yes.
These are unique individuals in the data science, correct?
Yes.
And when they disagree, what happens? Does people cast spells or roll a 30-sided die? What happens in the case that people disagree?
I think often they just stop talking to each other, or they. I think so. One thing that is.
How does resolution? I mean, it's funny, but how does a resolution occur when you've got multiple parties in an open source? This is one of the things that I think people don't understand about governance. There is a governance process, isn't there?
Yeah. So R is kind of different to many other open source programming languages because there isn't that like benevolent dictator for life that many languages have. Instead, there's this larger group of people that functions kind of more like an anarchy. So I think what has happened in the R community primarily is people sort of have avoided conflict by sticking to like, I'm going to work on this area and I'm going to work on that area.
Got it.
Let's
have a little territory, you keep it clean, and everything just interrupts. Who's the right temperament, and is there a temperament or a type of person that is drawn to data science in your experience? So for people who are considering a career in this, is it a certain type of person? Introverts, extroverts? Is it people who are puzzle solvers? Is it people who are methodical, grinded out people? What do you think makes for great data scientists? Is it creative people, or is it rigid people? Or
I think it's really like to me, it's being a really good data scientist is about balancing like creativity and curiosity with skepticism. So you want to like bring lots of interesting questions to the table and interesting approaches, but you always want to be like second guessing yourself. Like, I just found this. Does that really make sense? Is that true? How can I ask this question another way so I can double check my own work? So I think that kind of like tension between curiosity and skepticism is really important. And then the other part is that just being organized and methodical and like making sure you've dotted all of your I's and crossed your T's and made sure that like you've come up with a result once. Can you run through your process again and come up with the same result again?
So being methodical, but also, having this never-ending questioning and sort of making sure that you're not taking something for granted.
Exactly.
Trusting in numbers.
And I think that it's easy to be skeptical when you get a result that you don't agree with. Like, it's really hard to be skeptical when you do get the result that you kind of hoped for. And I think that's a really important skill, like being skeptical, particularly skeptical when you see what you want to see.
I'm trying to be better at predicting. What are the secrets to being good at predicting and knowing if you're a good predictor? Because my job as an angel investor is placing a bet and saying, hey, is this person going to win or not? Is this company going to win or not? Is this idea going to win or not? So I've started to come up with my own little techniques for it. But what do you think from a statistical point of view? And prediction is a subset, I believe, of statistics. I could be wrong, but I've been really trying to figure out prediction and prediction markets and how I can become good at spotting opportunities that other people cannot see. What's your advice for me?
I think my kind of main advice would be to record your predictions and then test them, and to do that in kind of a thoughtful way, and to make sure. I think the biggest challenge when doing predictions is that it's very easy to fool yourself into thinking that you're doing a really good job of predicting, because if you think, I'm going to list all the companies I invested in, and then all of the most successful companies come to the top of your head, and you're like, well, I did a great job, but you've kind of forgotten, for these 5 great companies, there are actually 1,000 other companies
that you passed on investing
so well, yeah,
or that you invested in that didn't.
Exactly.
So you have this sort of, what do they call it, survivor bias?
Yeah. So I think being consistent, making sure you record everything and not just relying on
This is what I'm in the process of doing, because I've been thinking about this super forecasting. I don't know if you saw this book, Super Forecasting. Anyway, I've been thinking about this forecasting. And so I'm starting to write down why I thought a company would succeed and why I think it could fail, and then why I made the decision to invest or not. So here's my best reason of why they will succeed. This is a huge market.
Yep.
And the founder seems really driven. This is the reason I think it's going to fail. The founder is a megalomaniac who is going to, go off the rails and not listen to anybody. So there's this chance that he could just go mad, or she is going to give up because she doesn't have resilience, or she does have resilience, whatever it is. And then, but listing both my pros and my cons, and then the thing, and then look back on them in 5 years and see if I had any kind of ability to predict. And I'm looking back, you know what I decided? I don't actually have the ability to predict. And you know what that led me to believe?
What's that?
I should just make bets. I should just make bets based upon people I know. Like literally, I know smart people, and I run in a smart circle. So I should just make bets based upon the people around me, not on what I think is going to work or not. And I've narrowed it down to just if I think the person has drive. Because if the person has drive, at least maybe if it's not working, they'll fight through it a little bit more than the next person. So that's really my whole investment thesis, is this person driven.
That's what I've never really understood about hedge fund managers. You hear about the best hedge fund managers, but if there's 100 hedge fund managers just making decisions completely at random, of course the top 1% of them are going to do really well just by chance.
They're going to be extraordinary.
Exactly.
There will have to be some extraordinary ones.
And so how much of that is luck and how much of it is actual insight?
I think people remember the luck, and that's the thing about being a hedge fund manager is, let's say you have this hedge fund. If you get paid the year you knock it out, let's say nothing, it's modest result up or down for 3 years, but then you have a year 4 where you hit it out of the park. In year 5, they don't claw it back. Let's say you win $1 billion in year 4, and the first 3 years were marginal either way. If you make $1 billion in year 4, in year 5, if you lose $500 million, you don't give the $1 billion back. You just have to win the $1 billion back to get any more. So you get a new high water mark, as it were. But you can just shut down your hedge fund and go take a break and then go do the next one. So it's it's very weird motivation, which is to make crazy bets. if you start thinking about it, like our society is in some way, these traders are incentivized to make outrageous moves
Yeah.
because they get paid a percentage, and the percentage is bigger on an outrageous move, and there's no downside to not.
For them, there's no downside. Yeah.
Yeah, for society, it's terrible. You lever up something 10x that, and you mix a bunch of mortgage-backed securities together, and nobody knows what it is. Like, all you care about is that. So incentives are just borked. What question do you want to solve most? Like, if you look at society, are there questions that you look at and go, God, if we had this data, we could probably solve for this? And we talked about education is where you want people to learn more. But are there like specific problems where you're like, God, if we could get more data, if we just had more data, we could end this suffering, we could solve these problems, energy, water. I'm trying to think about where you think data is going to take us in the coming decades or even in the coming century. I mean, we're not going to live to be 130 or 40 or 50, and I'm not sure how old you are. But, if we did, what is this end of the century going to look like based on what we learn in data?
I think in some way the questions that are most interesting to me are the ones sort of about like how humans work, like how we think, like how we learn is one example, but like how can we be happy? Like how can we make decisions that sort of benefit society as a whole? Like how are we going to deal with like if as technology gets better and better and like eliminates more and more jobs, like what do people do instead? Like how do we handle that? How do we
employment? Gosh, that's a big one.
Yeah. And
distribution of wealth is somewhat related. You have this abundance. How do you redistribute it?
Exactly, and
or not?
Yeah, and how do you like make sure that kind of like life is fair for people, so that when you're genuinely talented, like regardless of where you start, you can end up somewhere good, so that we're not sort of trapped in these like kind of calcifying strata of where your parents are rich, so you'll be rich, so your children will be rich and successful and so on. I think, I don't know, that there's sort of like social mobility and how can we, then it sort of comes into like politics and how can we help, like how can you get large groups of people to make the right decision that's actually collectively in their best interests? Like that seems to be a really challenging question.
It does seem really challenging. If you just think about people and the food they eat, they put in their bodies and their incentives to do so. We have whatever it is, 50 million people in this country on some sort of food stamps or welfare, but those people happen to be the ones who are also suffering from diabetes, obesity, and eating poorly the most. Well, if the government's giving them food, what decisions are we making them?
Yeah.
Like, well, the government's giving them food, and the food they're eating is bad for them. Wait a second. There's something's wrong here.
Yeah.
Like, should the government giving them healthy food, or should food stamps be for Captain Crunch or for kale? I don't know. It's a lot of.
Yeah, I think one thing I heard a long time ago that I thought was kind of interesting is that, like in most countries, if you're poor, you're skinny, but in America, if you're poor, you're fat. Like there's something profoundly.
And by the way, I'm super offended. It's large and in charge. Just so you know, we don't want to call fat. We don't want to. The best thing in my life is when my friends told me I was a fat bastard, and I was like so embarrassed. I basically lost weight. I think it's like this. Our society's gone totally backwards. If somebody gets fat, you're fat shaming them if you tell them they're a fat bastard. I want to personally thank my friends who told me I was such a fat bastard because it was embarrassing for me and I lost 20 pounds. But also, even looking out from the planet, I always think about like, you can look in, you can look out, right? So it's like society is one thing, but then you're like looking at brain science. Like they're doing this crazy brain project trying to understand the brain and replicate it in the EU. They're putting billions of dollars into the brain. If we could ever understand our brains and understand consciousness, like what is consciousness? This is crazy, like with the impact on artificial intelligence. And then if you think about the cosmos, what do we actually know? We're finding planets. We still don't know much about what's out there, and we don't know much about the energy needed to get out there, or we don't even know that much about time. Are we going to solve these problems with data, you think?
I would hope so. Yeah. I would like to think so, being someone who works a lot with data.
Yeah.
I don't know, like science is somehow, there's something really interesting, I think, like particularly about physics, like it's sort of driven by both like data and by like some vision of like beauty, like what theories are beautiful, like that's what somehow we're drawn to, but like what does that Like, what does that mean? And is it reasonable to expect that the universe is explained by beautiful theories? Like, I think that's sort of an interesting question as well.
Yeah, it's sort of like the theories always turn out to have some level of beauty in it. And then it really starts to get into your mind and consciousness, like, well, what is our perception of what beauty is? Right? Because you start to think about it, it's beautiful in our perception. We find the beauty in it. So then are we living in some sort of, worldview of what our interpretation of beauty is, and then how does that affect how we look at the cosmos? Or is beauty innate in whatever this crazy world is? Does it make you believe in God when you look in the data? Like, or are you an atheist?
I'm an atheist.
You're an atheist.
Yeah.
Do you think about, like, is there something that's going to be discovered in the data at some point that'll maybe change that? Like, is there something we can figure out?
I feel like
Is God in the data?
If I said, like, it would be unreasonable for me to say, no, there's nothing in the data that would change my mind. So, yes, potentially data could change my mind.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's sort of one thing that I think would be neat about, like, meeting aliens would be to get that completely external viewpoint, like just seeing, like, what some organism that grew up in a completely different set of constraints, like, would they agree with, like, these ideas of, like, the beauty of equations, like how you sort of universe, like, it seems like math should be pretty universal.
Their planet should have the same time, math, science. They should have come to some of the same conclusions on some continuum.
Yeah, you would hope, but just sort of seeing, like, what is the same and what is different. Like, just those two data points would be incredibly valuable.
Your lizard society that grew up, or your giant shark society on this all-water planet. Like, what did you figure out that we didn't, and what did we figure out? I really think this is, like, one of the most interesting reasons to be looking out in the cosmos. Yuri Milner is doing these crazy projects to try to find extraterrestrial life. I mean, it's conceivable we're going to find evidence of it in our lifetime. I think that's the most mind-blowing thing that could happen in our lifetime. Is the finding, even if we don't contact them, just the knowledge that we found exist. Them. A dead system, a dead society, but we know it's there. Is there anything bigger we could find? What would be the bigger? I mean, if we found God, I don't know what else we could find. That would actually blow our minds more than another species or another life out there.
But there's the unknown unknowns. There's the things that we don't even anticipate that maybe we'd find out. It may be just mind blowing, but we don't know at all. It's not even a possibility based on what we know now.
Like The Matrix. I mean, that's why The Matrix as a movie was so inspiring to so many people. It's like, well, what if what we know is actually a simulation?
Yeah. I mean, and to me, like, that sort of would be one of the most compelling reasons for the sort of underlying elegance of physics is because someone, like, it's a computer program and they just made all this stuff, like, look nice in the low-lying code. Like, that would be, like, a sort of a reasonable explanation for why there is this beauty in physics and elegance in the math, because someone else created it deliberately.
Oh my God. I mean, I think you and I need to go see the sequel to Prometheus together. Did you see Prometheus?
I did.
See, I get the sense that, like, we both have this kind of thing, like, who made the engineers, right? And why? And what is the purpose of the engineers? Like, it really is, when you think about a lot of this stuff comes back to, our parents and how did we wind up here? This concept of the parent-child relationship and what is the purpose of all of this? And it really comes down to consciousness, like.
And I think it's sort of interesting. Like, to me, it's also like some questions like that you simply cannot answer with data.
Yeah.
And I think it's always, like, to me, it's also important to think, like, there are so many things we can answer with data, but it's not like a complete philosophy of life. You can't answer every single question you might have with data.
How did you get into data? Did you get into data because of these deep philosophical wonderings of the world?
It was actually like honestly a process of elimination.
So it wasn't like causation. It just happens to be a correlation that you think about the big things.
Yeah. I mean, out of high school, I started off in medical school.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You wanted to be a doctor, ambulance driver, what?
I wanted to be a doctor, which now, like, looking back at it, seems really strange because I don't, like, fundamentally like people. Like, I like talking to people, but just the idea of a job where I have to talk to people all day, like, that to me now just that just seems awful. Like what I like doing is
You just described my entire career.
yeah.
It's
Like
my job.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but just like
Yeah.
for me, like that is.
Don't
not
worry, the
what I
interview's
really
almost
enjoy.
over. We'll get through it. We're going to make it through. But you're an introvert, right? Like
Yeah, exactly.
Clearly.
Like what I like doing is sitting by myself and thinking about things and coding, which is very much not what a doctor does.
Right. So then you found this
Yeah.
tract.
So I kind of crossed medicine off my list, and I went back to what I'd enjoyed in high school, which is statistics and programming, and that was kind of a match made in heaven. And I feel sort of like incredibly fortunate that that's what I'm really interested in, given it's just skyrocketing in popularity right now, and I can just kind of ride that.
It
that
is
roller coaster.
timing is so much of career. You know, like you at another time they would have looked at you and been like, "Get out of the room! Like we don't really care about your opinion because of the statistics." You would have been, you know what you would have been? You would have been the guy in Moneyball 2 years earlier who said like, "I think I have some players who we should draft." And they say, "Get out of here, kid! Like we're not drafting based on your cockamamie calculator. Like are you crazy?" But it is interesting when you think about it on an evolutionary basis. Introversion versus extroversion. People who get their energy from the quiet and the thinking versus the people who get their energy from the exuberance and the interaction, right? I'm 86%, I think I was 84, 86% extrovert on my Myers-Briggs. Do you know what you are percentage-wise for your introversion?
It's pretty high.
You might be the Mira.
Although I have kind of this, it's sort of interesting, like I think on average I'm at like it's about average in terms of how much time I spend socializing with people. But it's like three weeks out of the month, I'm just at home, and all I do all day is just like program, and I don't talk to anyone. And then 1 week out of the month, I travel and I do talks and I do courses and I talk to people like you, and I'm just like talking to other people, 8 or 10 hours a day. Yeah.
That's what I hear from introverts is it becomes exhausting. They have to recharge their battery.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I had to talk for 8 hours today.
So I have like the 3 weeks of not talking to people to
look forward to.
Yeah.
It's just, what it is it's introversion and extroversion. I find it's like, it's a yin yang, it's a balance kind of thing. So even myself with the massive extroversion, like when I get out of this conversation, I'm so inspired. I'm going to write for an hour. I'm going to read, like talking to you makes me want to like search the internet. And look up a bunch of stuff and watch Prometheus and do all that stuff. Like, I just gets my battery recharged. And then it makes me a little bit introverted, where I want to go off into a corner and maybe think about stuff and get a little bit more contemplative. So it's really interesting on a species basis, because now we live in a post being eaten by saber-toothed tigers and fight or flight. And I think that, like, I wonder what this introversion, extroversion thing, the introverts create so much in society. And extroversion, I guess it does in some way help society.
I mean, it helps the introverts talk to each other,
Maybe.
to other people.
Yeah, I guess so. Pull them out of there.
Communicates ideas and spreads.
Communicates ideas, exactly. Spread
spreads
memes,
ideas,
right? Like, so you get the Steve Jobs out there and then Johnny Ives in the lab. It's like a very interesting thing. All right, listen, this is it's turned into a philosophy discussion, and then we're going to have to talk about statistics. Now it's talked into philosophy, and is there life on other planets, and what are we in? Actually, I really think, like, it's interesting. Sam Altman at Y Combinator said they want to do a research thing where they want to pay somebody for 5 years to study basic income, which I found super interesting because it just keeps coming up. Like, when jobs go away, what happens? And, like, for the last 3 years, I've been reading about basic income on the internet, just alone at night on the Wikipedia or other places. And it sounds like in Denmark and Norway and a couple of places, they've had referendums and they've been thinking about this because I think everybody in technology kind of sees the writing on the wall that jobs are going to go away. We've already got a bunch of people who've given up on having jobs. It kind of makes sense that AI and the self-driving cars, it's like a lot of these jobs are going to go away, and people are kind of putting up this front that they're not. I kind of think it's a black swan event. That's right. You think it's a black swan event around the corner that jobs go away? Or a large swath of jobs goes away?
Either that or the people rebel and the technology sector goes away. Like
it could become like that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really, and just like figuring out, because there's some jobs that, I don't know. Like when I talk to like high school students who are thinking about what should I do in my career, I think if you're thinking about what career should you start doing now, you need to think about careers that only humans can do. Like, for example, I think like if you're going to be a doctor, do not go to be a radiologist, because radiologists are already like completely outsourced. Like you can be a radiologist anywhere. And I think the
India,
the next step of like machine learning applied to radiology, like that's, 10 years away.
I mean, forget about that. I mean, what about like open heart surgery? At a certain point, the robot's going to do a much better job at LASIK, and then it will like, okay, did your LASIK better? You trust the robot better for LASIK.
Yeah.
Okay, your root canal? Yeah, we charge the robot's better. Okay, now what's next? So setting a broken arm? Yeah, robot's better. Oh, open heart surgery? Of course the robot's better.
Yeah.
But
it's going to take I would be very surprised. Like the art of finding out what's wrong, like the conversation between the doctor and the patient to find out why are they here, what's wrong, and what to do about it. I think that is really, really hard to solve. Like that. That
I wonder if
process.
big data against the statistics, you coming in and you're just describing your symptoms through an AI type questioning, or even just a decision tree.
Yeah.
I wonder if you went with the statistics as outlined, if you would get a better result than a doctor on average, or what percentage of doctors would the statistics make a better decision on what? Like, for some percentage of doctors, for sure, the statistics are better, and then for some of them, they're going to have something there. It's actually, when you look at like chess or poker players, like some games, I think what it comes down to is some games are solvable.
Yeah.
And chess is one of them. Poker is not one of them because you have incomplete information.
Yeah.
You play poker or chess? You should take up poker. That would blow your mind. Because that is trying to solve a problem where you have incomplete information. It's mind-blowing.
The irony is the only thing I gamble on is slot machines.
The thing that is totally rigged and predictable what you'll win or lose.
Because
you like the sound?
It's the only thing where like anything else, it starts turning into work. Like if I was going to play blackjack, like I'd have to learn the optimal strategy, I'd have to learn card counting.
So you like the idea of turning your brain off and pressing the button and watching ding, ding, ding.
Exactly.
You like the sounds. Okay, that's good. It's a Pavlovian thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it's like high and low. For you, you're like the professional chef who works at a Michelin-starred restaurant, and you eat an In-N-Out burger.
Yeah.
And you revel in your In-N-Out burger. That's your In-N-Out burger.
Yeah.
That's all. It's nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah.
It's like me reading Us magazine. It's like the guy who writes the opinion page, in the Wall Street Journal, like sneaking Us Weekly onto the plane and reading it, inside of the New Yorker.
Yeah.
Not that I've ever done that. All right. Listen, I like this guy. You and I could have like a bromance, I think. It could be like a pretty cool thing because you're smart and we're like mirror opposites. You're smart and you can program, and an introvert, and I'm an extrovert and I'm stupid. So you could make me smarter. But poker, I'm telling you, you should go. I'm sure where you live there's some card rooms.
Yeah.
This would be an amazing thing for you to do and try to figure out the game of poker.
Yeah.
Position, statistics, because it would bring something to you of having to read people, which is very much looking them in the eye, trying to figure out their facial movements and what's motivating them and what's motivating them now that wasn't motivating them 2 hours ago.
Yeah.
So how has their chip stack changed and their effect on the behavior? Did they win 3 hands in a row? It's like a Pandora's box of figuring shit out.
Yeah.
Poker. That's my recommendation for you, Hanley.
Thank you.
Hanley's like, whatever. Yes, everybody go check out.
When I become addicted to poker and lose all my money.
You know what? Play in the low stakes games, and then go into the high stakes games, and I bet you'll be a net positive player for sure, for sure. So is RStudio hiring data scientists? You're probably always hiring.
I mean, we don't
hiring programmers.
Yeah, we don't we make tools that data scientists use. We don't tend to hire data scientists.
And what is it? RStudio.com. Oh, yeah, RStudio.com. So go to RStudio.com.
Yep.
Check it out, and Hadley Wickham on the Twitter, and he's got his official website, had.co.nz. What a cute domain, had.co.nz. And he's github.com/Hanley for you developers out there. You can see his commits.
Yes, although GitHub's down right now, I think. So.
What?
Yes, it's.
Is that a first? That's a rare thing.
Yeah, it's rare.
GitHub down. What's the world coming to? All right, listen, this has been an amazing episode of This Week in Startups. Thanks, Emmy Award-winning producer Jackie, and WeWork for hosting, our sponsors and partners, Bryce, my chief of staff, Ashley, my EA, and my Pepper Potts, Luke and Matt and Angelique, welcome to the team, Jake and Jackie, and Charlie and Troy. my little special projects in training. Welcome to the team. We'll see how you do. No guarantees. I'm watching. Charlie and Troy, I'm watching always your work. All right. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.